small acorn to great oak. It starts modestly and grows with the passage of time, and I think that's what the legal service has done.
We had to grow up as children of the fight, really.
We're not scared to take things up. We're not scared to stand our ground and pick up the fight and fight for community.
It's 50 years since the inception of VALS. It was valuable way back then, and it's valuable today.
It's hard to talk to an organisation that has been around for so long. In some sense, she is her own identity. She is her own person, and we are merely stewards of her values and her mission. At each and every moment in Victorian Aboriginal history, in the last 50 years, VALS has played an important role in that. The resilience of VALS can be put down to one thing: it's black. And that means that it is run by Aboriginal communities who understand that we're not going to win each and every day, that we're going to go through hard times more often than not, but that we need to keep pushing, we need to keep striving for better. And certainly that's what VALS has done for 50 years and will do for much longer than I'm around.
I was a junior barrister at the time, and it became pretty apparent to me, even in those early days, that Aboriginal people were not getting access to justice in any fair or realistic way. And that was, I think, the driving force for all of us to make sure that it worked, because it had a bigger issue than just having a legal service. It was access to justice that we thought needed to be achieved.
All the policies and stuff that are in government now, that was really what we grew up seeing. It's amazing to be a part of that, and a part of seeing my father and my elders in helping make these changes for what people take for granted now, really.
Law reform at that time was something new, so our organisation had quite a bit to do with the law reform in supporting disadvantaged people, not only Aboriginal people, but whatever reforms that happened within our community filtered out to the wider community.
The challenge at the very beginning was to overcome state government resistance to having an Aboriginal legal service. The department that was involved were quite resistant to it and wouldn't provide funding. And then, for reasons that we've never been able to ascertain, there was a total change of heart, and they became overnight very supportive and started offering funding to set up a service. What that meant was suddenly, instead of having to plead or beg for funds, all of the funding that we needed was made available.
The personalities of the staff that came through the legal service was crucial in its sustainability to where it is now, and it laid down the foundations of the culture and the ethics around how the organisation is run and how it engages with community. And one of those key people was Jim Berg.
He used to live at Framlingham, where I'm still living today. He moved off to Melbourne at an early age. He became involved in social justice issues. He's very, he was older than what I am, and we looked up to him as an older brother.
He just had an intuitive vision about what a legal service should do, so it wasn't just the day-to-day service, which was important, but it was achieving higher objectives. After about 2 or 3 years, he came along to us. We were all directors of the Victorian Legal Service when it was set up, the Aboriginal Legal Service, and said it was time for the service to be converted into a Koori-run organisation. And he proposed that we all resign and get a totally Koori representative board, which we agreed to. And again, in the early 1970s, that took some vision, and it was terrific that he did it. So, and that was successful in making it a community-based organisation from those early days. He was quite strict on benefits and how things were done, and that meant that it was a relatively scandal-free organisation, which again made it stand apart from many other counterparts in other places. So they were sort of small aspects that came together to make it a really significant and very successful organisation in those early days.
He explained to us that they intend to set up a Aboriginal legal service to cater for the Aboriginal people. And we more or less said, yeah, okay, we didn't really understand it. Anyway, we all signed up, and then it became a reality, and we certainly used it.
Yeah, I'm really proud to know that my father, Jim Berg, was such a key part of VALS in those early days. It's amazing to have that legacy that he has, not just in VALS, but many other organisations too, but particularly with VALS, that work that he did there to help kind of establish that and set it up so that we can have this really important service for Aboriginal community today. Yeah, it's a real great sense of pride to know that Dad was part of that. The key things I remember kind of coming out from that legal expertise and that role that he played was particularly around the return of the ancestral remains and how that flowed on from his work with VALS. And then also the legacy of him having worked with Ron Merkel, and now I get to work here in Treaty with Ali Merkel. And it's powerful to kind of continue this legacy of our fathers to continue to work together in this space. And I often share with Ali a photograph I've got of us as little kids, and now we're actually working side by side, continuing that legacy of our fathers. We still have our fathers drop by and give us some advice and support. But yeah, we're now forging our own path together, but definitely building on the work of our fathers, which is really powerful. Dad has always talked about the importance of principles. You've got to have principles, and you have your principles and you stand by them. And I think that sits really nicely within that justice space, that if you can come into that justice space with a key set of principles and stick by those, that can help you navigate that quite complex space.
Jim came without any experience, but it was like blank paper, but he had the vision and the sensitivity to create something quite special without any prejudices from the past, and set up a really great service, got good lawyers and set up an organisation where people work together well. And that was one of the sort of wise decisions that were made in the early days.
In the early days of VALS, I remember when in Fitzroy, it was a horrible building, I must say, walking up and down the stairs and, you know, but we did it.
It was on top of another building, and underneath us was Nindabaya, which is Nindabaya was a drop-in centre for the Fitzroy mob, and the Aboriginal Legal Services above that, and in front was a bakery.
My recollection is a very small office. The location was important because Gertrude Street, unlike it is now, was then a major gathering centre for Aboriginal people coming from all over Victoria.
I think Archie Roach, in his many interviews, talked about when he wanted to find his community, that's where he ended up in Fitzroy looking for the mob.
We'd walk from Collingwood up to Gertrude Street, go to the health service, the co-op. We had a co-op in Smith Street, Aboriginal co-op, and you, as a kid, they were sort of like, I don't know if I'd say lifeline, but that's where you went and to feel safe, really, yeah.
As a kid, just run from office to office, pretty much like a family reunion, popping and seeing your family.
There was a ready-made clientele within a stone's throw of the legal service, so it was the obvious place to set it up, and it meant that people became aware of it and found out about it through word of mouth pretty quickly, and so it started becoming a gathering place.
The first time ever we had something like that, and just down the road we had Aboriginal Medical Service and other Aboriginal organisations, and I think that was one of the first community legal services to be established.
You know, when we talk about community control, you really felt it at that building.
My father was very passionate about his mob, his people, and he was always very passionate about a fair go, really, a fair go for his people.
My wife, when I first met her in '82, I knew she also wasn't just a special woman that I loved, and she loved me. I knew she had something different about the way she and her lifestyle. With her involvement with the legal service, it was just a one full gung-ho. She wanted to get something done. And then she met a guy in the early 90s, late 80s, Alf Bamblett. And when they first met together, they clicked. They were, they were on the same level about what our community should be.
My father would talk to anybody, and he really believed that it was through talking and discussions, whether it was somebody in a high position or anyone, that's how you made change. I grew up admiring that. That's what I wanted to grow up and be, work in our community and help make a change.
She was well noted for her strength as a woman that's had self-determination and had a focus for the vision of how the legal service, which still stands for what it is today. She was one of the cornerstones of the many people that she was involved with, Pat Dodson, Jimmy Burke.
She was working there, Auntie Bunter. I've known her from a child also, because her people come from the Aboriginal community where I come from. And these people were very prominent in Aboriginal advancement in those days. That's what we described it as.
She said, I'm not the real answer to everything, but for my part in it, I'll make sure that things go along as smoothly as I can.
VALS has faced many challenges over 50 years. Often enough, the themes are the same: funding, workforce, and also just the fact that the law is rather crap in the way that it's designed. It doesn't work for our communities. And so those three challenges remain our biggest.
Lots of times through changes of government, we've had the challenge of survival, challenge of whether we can grow enough to satisfy the needs in our communities. You know, if you read the statistics around domestic violence, still deaths in custody, kids in out-of-home care, and just people who are incarcerated, all those stats seem to be growing rather than diminishing.
So in 2015, or maybe it was late 2014, the federal government announced that they would be making funding cuts to organisations like VALS, other ALSs, community legal services, a whole range of organisations. At the 11th hour, they decided not to make the cuts. I remember I was at the funeral service for Uncle Alf Bamblett when the news came through that they weren't making the funding cuts, and it kind of felt, I don't know, it kind of felt symbolic that that's where I was. And I know that we were thinking about what jobs would we have to cut, what services would we have to cut, would we have to look at closing regional offices, or would we, everything was kind of on the table because we simply did not know how much would potentially be cut. To be talked about as if you're not needed, that your work isn't important, that has a huge impact on how you're feeling about the work that you do.
Really, we're fighting against a system that for 200 years has been geared against First Nations people. So every day the fight is against structural injustice against First Nations people, and at times banging your head against the wall, trying to introduce change into a system that vehemently doesn't want it.
We know that the criminal legal system in Australia was created to enact the dispossession of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples and to enforce colonisation. And that has rippled across, and we still see the way in which the criminal legal system is used against our clients.
There was difficult matters, there were difficult cases, there were difficult police officers, but in terms of a lasting and really pervasive heaviness, the sort of relentless death of clients is very, very difficult to reconcile. I think there's just this palpable misery around the frequency that clients die too early.
In 2022, when I came over, the criminal team particularly was going through probably the biggest challenge it's faced in the last decade or so. The impact of COVID had really been significant on the entire profession, not just at VALS, and so we'd lost a lot of practitioners. But then obviously the demand for our service had increased and continues to increase. And so we had this terrible situation where we had far less lawyers than we were able to provide our service with, and continuing increased demand. And so we instituted a client freeze, for several months while we recruited, staffed the team, got through the backlog, and then eventually reopened our service.
We sort of have to turn to community members and say, well, we can't, at this time, can't help you with that, even though we'd like to, because we're constrained by our resources.
I'm constantly in awe of the resilience that our clients have to dealing with these systems, the way in which our clients keep coming back and pursuing accountability and justice despite the fact that the legal system is flawed. And it's been a real privilege to be able to work with clients in challenging some of those systems and the systems that are pitted against them.
The institutions and systems that have been set up in this country were not set up for First Nations communities. They don't accord with our values, our ways of being, knowing and doing. What they do is perpetrate, the worst parts of settler colonialism.
The days are gone when we can offer services that are not culturally appropriate or indeed culturally safe. VAL's role in advocating for self-determination is absolutely critical. We are certainly at a point in Australia's history and Victoria's history when organisations like Victoria Legal Aid, we're wanting to do much more and understand much more about what self-determination looks like.
VALS empowers community because it is fundamentally a community-based organisation. It is for community, led by and driven by communities.
I think all of our Aboriginal community-controlled organisations, including VALS, where we've got First Peoples leading the experts in our areas, in our fields, and advocating for our people, that's a really key pillar of self-determination, that we're not relying on other people to be our experts, other people to be our voices. It's our people who can be there, leading and supporting for our people and giving us strength. And it's a really key part of our strength of our community is organisations like VALS that can actually represent our people for our people.
I think it's reassuring to know that there's a service like VALS that exists that can, if people that you know of in community or in family do come into contact with justice or they're in the cells, that they have someone they can call that is mobbed, that will understand their needs.
We had a community education unit within the legal service when we were in Alexander Parade that was going out and talking to the mob about their rights. And not only their rights, but also their responsibilities.
What that means is communities and community members are empowered with knowledge, legal knowledge, and options of that legal knowledge before it's too late. So before it gets to the point where they're so far down the legal path, they are coming to us almost as an emergency thing. So they have that knowledge to make those decisions before they come to us.
One amazing example which I've been able to witness at VALS is the way in which we've been able to help families who've lost their loved ones in custody and due to police violence, to be able to help them to seek that accountability in ways that are meaningful for them. For some of our clients, that's meant assisting them to speak to media, to be able to tell their story in the way that they want to tell it, and to be able to pursue outcomes in coronial inquests that they are really passionate about.
For the criminal team particularly, I think clients can approach our service knowing that they're going to receive a first-class legal representation. Also, they know that they're going to receive a really culturally safe service. They know that the lawyers that they are going to interact with not only are trained, but they have far more interaction with community members than really any other lawyer that they could approach.
So to me, VALS in and of itself is an embodiment of self-determination. All Aboriginal organisations are an embodiment of self-determination. It's Aboriginal people leading the organisation and driving the strategic direction. And it's our community that are directly experiencing the issues. It's coming from a perspective where the issues impact on you, and so you have a completely different experience of it. the people who work at VALS, sometimes they might need the services of VALS or of other organisations, and that's such a different experience to lots of other organisations that you'll see. So it brings a different perspective of how services should be delivered, about the issues that our community faces.
You're not just a financial note, you're not just a statistic to be put in the books. You're one of our people, and we make sure that you're represented in the manner that you deserve to be represented, and that you're presented to the outside world, and particularly the justice system, as a person who is worthwhile.
I remember speaking to a client of mine who was in custody once, and saying, why is it important that VALS exists? Why is it important to you to have the Aboriginal Legal Service represent you? And he didn't say much, this fellow, ever, but he said it's actually just about not having to explain anything, not having to get someone up to speed about me, my history, everything that's around me that has impacted on the way that I live and the way my community's been affected. And that's a really rich history to be working in.
Having a voice, something as simple as having a voice, is so important to self-determination and to cultural safety. It's about respect for who your identity is, and knowing that if you're given the information and the tools, you can make the differences and the decisions that are going to impact properly and positively on yourself and your community. So in lots of ways, it's also giving up of power and giving over to the people who've had power denied to them for so long. And at its heart, it's inclusion. So it's kind of a no-brainer that the two go together, self-determination and cultural safety, yeah.
Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people have lived on this land for 60,000 years, and a lot of that was thanks to the governance structures that they created and the decision-making structures they created. I think we shouldn't, as a state, be scared of, like a really powerful, clear, self-determined model, because it worked for 60,000 years much better than the governance structures of the colonial system have over the last 235 years.
The expansion of VALS into communities has helped communities because it means that their lawyers are actually where they are. Kind of seems simple, but often what we see, particularly in mainstream legal service delivery, is that lawyers are based in Melbourne, in the big city, and they're going out to regional communities to service them. So they're there for the day, maybe for a few hours. There's no meaningful connection, there's no relationship, there's no ability to build rapport and trust.
Our communities across the state are disadvantaged. So being able to have lawyers come with great expertise and knowledge and understanding of the impacts of colonisation and the issues that Aboriginal people face on a daily basis is very unique in what's needed. We also have the client service officers out in the regions as well that are able to step in and give some of that background information, and rather than them repeating the stories, we have local Aboriginal people on the ground that are able to assist the client and tell the story.
In the regions, traditionally VALS has had a bit of a lighter footprint. It's often been our client service officers in the community there to talk to mob that need our help and then connect them back to lawyers. But we've really been growing our service delivery in regional Victoria. We want to make sure that everyone has access to lawyers that they need. I know a lot of our client service officers in the regions do a lot of driving clients around, make sure they get to court dates and different services. They make sure people have phones with credit. They make sure people apply for the support services they need, and they often act as advocates to make sure that they get into those services.
Regional areas is quite different. Like, I've only been in Metro for, I say only, probably 5 years now, but I think the access and the level of supports is not as many options. So it's really important to look at how organisations can work together as well, and I think that's something that VALS have done really well in how do they collaborate with what's already happening and how do they strengthen it rather than recreating or setting up new things and new ways of doing. Yeah, I think having that consistency as well, to have a service that regardless if you're based or you live in East Gippsland or you live down in Warrnambool, that there's actually the same level of service that you expect to have access to.
We know that we have high representation of youth crime in some of our regional areas. We have high numbers of family violence, high numbers of crime and family law needs that require a local service. We need to be there to respond to community and give them that option of engaging with an ACO-based legal service as opposed to a mainstream legal provider.
It's appalling, the jailing system that we've got. We have to find alternatives, and to have VALS, that is an alternative to jailing our people. Once you jail people in society, you destroy the fabric of society. You destroy that family. You destroy that young person.
There's been many, many years where we've not received adequate funding, particularly in Victoria's Koori Court model. I think in recent times we've managed to turn that around.
What makes the Koori Court different? It's where the Aboriginal community and the general community could all be involved. It's a forum whereby the community is really doing the sentencing.
I've been here since 2016. VALS, I guess they come from Melbourne, so they only come up here for the week of the Koori Court, where these days, as in 2023, VALS have got their own office here, they've got their own workers here, it's working beautifully. The most we've had in one court sitting is up to 10 people. Only going by what VALS can do and can say, and so far this year it's worked perfect. When VALS first came out, there wasn't much support, but that all fell into line later on as time progressed, and both the policing community and the white community seen how valuable that was to the Aboriginal people and to society.
As we increase the amount of lawyers that we have in the regions, we're really making sure that all of the communities that we serve can come to us for all of their legal needs. So whether they're in family court, whether they need help with a child protection issue, whether they have a criminal matter, or whether they need help with a fine they can't afford to pay, VALS is there.
I would like to see the regions fully funded with their own solicitor, their own staff, legal team. I would like to see a lot more forums, a lot more community gatherings and information, given out to our mob. A chance for community to have a lot more say in the reforms that are happening. At the moment, we're kind of leaving it to the experts in the organisation, but that engagement needs to happen again. My auntie, who's on the riverbank, has got something to say. It should be her voice should be heard as well.
Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people are in all parts of Victoria, and this service that really thinks about how to serve their community best and that is led by the community itself needs to be in every part of Victoria. So it's fantastic to see the expansion of VALS into regional areas. They've always been in some regional areas, but they're really making a headway into making sure people are never far from their services. VALS is 50 years old and the Federation of Community Legal Centres is 40 years old, and the Federation was formed after about a decade of community legal centres across Victoria starting to serve communities. At the time, Victoria Aboriginal Legal Service was one of the founding members of the Federation of Community Legal Centres in 1983. So we've been working with VALS for a very long time.
It's a different way of legal representation. It's a way of representing clients that takes into account their whole life circumstances, and knowing that, you know, for so many of our mob who have legal issues, it's born out of their personal circumstances and what's going on in their immediate lives, but also what's going on systemically around them.
Koori Youth Council, as of 1st of April, has been auspiced by VALS. The auspice arrangement has been a really great step for us. We've been previously auspiced by a non-Aboriginal organisation, so rather than being established straight up, we wanted to be able to sit with an Aboriginal organisation, learn from them and grow with them around how their processes and policies impact their staff and their service delivery.
I see VALS as a critical partner for us and generally in the legal assistance sector in Victoria, working alongside not only VLA but community legal centres and other organisations such as JIRA. VALS is important because it helps us think very thoroughly about cultural capability, service design, and has also played an amazing role in the context of law reform, particularly in recent years in Victoria.
Reflecting back at least on the last 5, and particularly the last year, what I'm really proud of is that each and every time what we've done is we've chosen to ensure that we embody community values, that our fight becomes their fight, and vice versa. And we've certainly seen that in relation to Veronica Nelson and the changes in bail, in relation to Tanya Day and public intoxication. 2 things that happened in the last 12 months that were really important.
We are overrepresented in child protection, we're overrepresented in youth justice, we're overrepresented in the criminal justice system. We have lower rates of life expectancy. We have lower rates of our children progressing to university. We're really fighting for equality and we're fighting for justice.
VALS's role in the URUC inquiry has been particularly core and fundamental to identify first for itself what were the core priorities and was able to communicate those really well to others in the system and also to join with our own evidence, and we joined with VALS in some of the areas that they would have wished to have seen promoted as part of the commission.
We've seen in the Veronica Nelson inquest the government make changes in healthcare providers. We've seen changes in terms of the Tanya Day inquest with public drunkenness and our advocacy work with the family, with Tanya's family, and that's resulted in the decriminalisation of public drunkenness.
You only have to think about the bail reforms that we've seen in Victoria and the vital role that VALS played in relation to that, along with other parts of the legal assistance sector such as community legal centres and Victoria Legal Aid. But it is wonderful to see those reforms and we look forward to the next tranche of those reforms which relates to children. The unwavering support that VALS has had for raising the age, slow movement there but certainly movement, and that is also another very significant achievement.
When I first started in my role here at the Federation and I used to go and talk to friends about what my new job was about, they'd say, well, why do you need community lawyers? And I asked them whether they knew how old it was that a person would be before they could go to jail. And the answer was 10 years old. So in Victoria, 10-year-olds can go to jail. It's only through the advocacy of organisations like VALS that is starting to change. We've lifted it up to 12, we're going to get it to 14, which is the UN standard. But unless we had organisations like VALS, the issues wouldn't be raised to the level they needed to get that change. I do believe it's that direct work that VALS has done with the Victorian government to change the age of criminal responsibility that is having impact for all Victorian young people.
Previously to this role, I've worked in the justice space for just shy of 10 years, so being able to see a lot of the programs that they support and work on, and I think the one that probably sticks to mind the most though is through our work and through Koori Youth Council is Bulletin and the difference in supports for young people and a service dedicated not just to supporting a young person through court but actually all the work before court and all that post-court involvement, and having a team of of lawyers that are really trained and specialised in working with young people, but also working with young mob.
Working with young Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people is something that I'm really passionate about. If they do happen to come in contact with the criminal justice system, I feel very privileged to be in a position to be able to support the young people and help divert them out of the criminal justice system. From just 2 lawyers to now 6, including me. And we've got ACE workers, Aboriginal community engagement workers in both Shepparton and the Preston office, and we've got admin support, and we've got disability workers within the Bullet team. That's definitely been one of the highlights of my career, watching this team grow and watching this program come to life.
It actually started through a conversation I had with a young Aboriginal boy who was going through a bit of trouble. And he said that he doesn't really matter, that he's not strong, that he doesn't have a future, his father didn't, his grandfather didn't, and he wouldn't. It echoed with the story that my mother had told me often of growing up about how she felt in her community. How she felt often that when she was going out into that big white world, she was told that she wasn't good enough, that she didn't measure up. And I wanted to make sure that no other kids felt that way, that we were doing something to stop that feeling. Started in child protection and obviously in criminal justice in Melbourne, and it went really, really, really well. So well, in fact, that the Children's Court of Victoria, who they're not very fond of lawyers, they understand the need for them, but they fell in love with it. They could see the benefits in it, but most of all, not one of our kids who went through that program returned to the justice system. That means their lives changed for the better.
Proud of the fact that we make a difference. Some organisations that just sit out there and fill space, but they don't really make a difference in people's lives. And I think the legal service makes a difference with its contribution towards legislation, but not only that, legal education, like I say, the development of the community justice panels across the state. They implemented it, and it still carries on, and it's still getting people out of custody, working with them afterwards to change that lifestyle or change the, that swinging door sort of scenario in their lives where they come out, go back in, come out, go back in.
I do think it's really important that VALS shines a light on laws that we might have in Victoria or indeed in Australia that essentially have a disproportional impact on some people and particularly may have racist underpinnings to them. So for all these reasons and plus their work in child protection and many, many other areas, service delivery most importantly, I think VALS is an essential part to a healthy Victoria and the legal assistance sector.
One of the best things about working with VALS is the people. I've never met such passionate people who really believe in the work that they do and approach it with a real open heart and also with intelligence and with dedication to make sure that what takes place in every piece of work they do will lead to a fairer and more just Victoria.
I think one of the really special things about VALS, like with many Aboriginal organisations, is just the feeling of being at home and being able to be your complete self. Always lots of laughs, always lots of jokes, but always, working hard and seriously for the important issues. So yeah, I think that's some of the favourite memories for me.
Maybe fondness isn't the right word, but some really strong memories of clients opening up about their trauma and trusting you to help them to advocate for the change they want and the justice they want. There's some really vulnerable and tender moments, and I've really been privileged to be able to share those spaces and moments with our clients. I guess the memory of the trust that some of our clients have given me has been one of my fondest memories.
I'm very lucky to be able to work with some wonderful people in the community justice program and in the civil and human rights practice. Fundamentally and elementally, we do the work because of our clients, and so to see some of the strength, resilience and humour in my clients in the face of great oppression and injustice is really the reason I get out of bed in the morning.
Some of my fond memories include the fact that right after my mum died, VALS really became a home, really kind of became a place of nurturing and development, and also just allowed me to do what I do best, which is find ways to advocate for our community. Another fond memory is working with the Day family in relation to public intoxication. As all of us know, public order offences are things that knock down our community time and time and time again. In this case, it caused the death of Auntie Tanya Day, but it also caused the death of her uncle prior to her. And this was something that you could really see through generations of families, and being able to work with them on changing the law, changing the approach to make sure that it's health-led, was really, really fantastic for me.
One of my fondest memories at VALS, and one of the best experiences I've had here, has been working with Uncle Percy Lovett, who's the partner of Veronica Marie Nelson. I started working with Uncle Percy when I moved to VALS about 3 years ago, and have been really privileged to work with him as we fought for justice for Veronica. I've been really amazed to see his strength and resilience throughout the coronial inquest process, and actually seeing what amazing things that the families who've lost loved ones in custody can achieve. After Veronica's inquest, we've had really great outcomes in that the bail laws have been changed, the prison healthcare system in Victoria has been changed, and a lot of that is due to the fierce and staunch advocacy of Veronica's family.
My earlier memories of VALS is going out on circuit to regional Victoria, working with our client service officers, meeting community. That has always been really memorable.
Once I was walking down Smith Street in Fitzroy, and a fellow asked me for some spare change, and I gave it to him because I'm very generous. And somebody else asked me for money and I didn't have any left, so I said I don't have any. And he was remonstrating with me and saying, you know, give us your money, give us your money. And then out of stage left comes the Smith Street matriarch who I had acted for. She came in and said, leave. That's our lawyer. We're going to move you away, and then took my arm and marched me for the whole length of Smith Street until I got to probably further than I needed to go, because we just kept walking together. Spending that time with communities, all the people that were in community when they accepted us into, blowing in from Melbourne, that sense of ownership is a nice thing. Those were really wonderful experiences. The connections that I was able to make with those communities were really strong and rich and important. They're just not available in other legal roles, I don't think.
When Shepparton and Mooroopna experienced the flooding, Nerita and I and the other workers in Shepparton were able to get the assistance for some clean-up hampers that we gave, as well as some emergency relief or vouchers. My best memory was 2 little kids had come in, and I just finished with their mum, and then she was going on to the next part to get the vouchers. And they looked about 8 and 5, and one had a shirt on and one had no shirt on, shorts, because it was a warm day. But because of all the floods, they were both wet. And I'm like, oh, what are you doing? They're like, we went swimming, but don't tell Mum because we're not supposed to be in the storm water. I said, I kind of think Mum knows. They're like, how? They were just so shocked. But I think for me, it highlighted the resilience of children as well.
It's wonderful to see 50 years and we're here, We're still here fighting for our mob. We fight as a mob anyway, but to have services 50 years on that are there, and they'll continue to grow, and they'll continue the legacy of what people like my father and all the others have done.
You grew up knowing VALS is available as an Aboriginal person if you ever need it, and I think that's profoundly important and reassuring, and you know, in community, you know, if you're in trouble, you can ring VALS. And I think to have that strength and a testimony like that, you know, for 50 years is pretty astounding. I hope one day we get to a place in society where we actually don't need VALS, where, you know, we don't have such overrepresentation of legal issues for Aboriginal people in certain areas, where our kids aren't being removed at ridiculous rates. But in the meantime, I'm very glad that we've got VALS.
In the next 50 years for VALS, I would hope I'm still not there, because I believe that the best thing about VALS is that so many of us come into its doors, contribute, and then we leave for the next generation to come forth and do their part. I'd like to see that VALS is playing a leading role in a post-treaty world in Victoria. I would hope that we're straddling two legal systems, a First Nations-led one and obviously an Australian white-led one.
In terms of the future of the justice system from an Aboriginal perspective, I don't have the answers to those questions. What I do know is that we want to make sure government gets out of the way. We want to have a treaty space whereby our community, our experts can lead what that looks like. How do we get best outcomes for our communities through justice is not by politicians up in Spring Street telling us how to do it. It's by our community experts empowered to actually get the solutions we need. We know that as the Assembly, we're not the experts on every little part of the community. We've got our experts like VALS, who are the experts on the legal space, and so we're heavily relying on that expertise. We're very fortunate to have Nerita as part of the Assembly as well, to be able to draw directly from that expertise. But it is really key that the Assembly is seen as the kind of overarching body to help progress treaty, but it's going to be through the support of all of our organisations, including VALS, that we'll see better outcomes for our communities through treaty.
As a member of the broader community, this organisation must be here. VALS must be here, and it ought to provide the highest level of legal services to the Aboriginal community that it can. And that makes a stronger community for everybody.
In the next 50 years, ACOs and the Aboriginal Legal Service should be able to work in the context of a legal, political and social system that sees First Peoples recognised through treaty, and the possibilities of treaty are potentially limitless in terms of the extent to which Aboriginal community controlled organisations have power, control, governance and ownership of decision making relating to them and communities. So for VALS, what that means is in the next 50 years, there's the potential for us to no longer have to work in the context of a system that's singularly directed by a colonising government.
My team exists at VALS because of consistent abuses of power by police and prisons, consistent state violence against our clients. VALS is pushing for a zero prison population, and what that means is that hopefully in 50 years' time we don't have prisons in the way that they exist now. We don't have police constantly arresting our clients, acting in discriminatory ways to our clients, over-policing them and disrupting the ability for our clients to lead full and fulfilling lives.
I think that particularly for VALS, if it continued on its current growth trajectory, we would not only remain the premier legal service provider in the state, but we would be able to cover more of the state than in a more comprehensive way than I guess we're covering now. So I guess in the next 50 years, I would like to see that we keep up with that growth, and we're everywhere, I guess is the short answer.
I want there to be enough funding for us to implement for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander and ACOs and the community to be able to implement the programs that they want to implement, and to be able to work with community rather than the government making decisions for community, and given full autonomy over how they use those funds in whichever way that the community sees fit.
I would like to see the family law team grow some more, and to have Aboriginal specific client service officers based within the team. that specialise in child protection, and also possibly, if they can, have some sort of therapeutic background, because our families that do go through family law are experiencing a lot of hurt, a lot of trauma, and they're carrying intergenerational trauma with them. Hopefully we can start making some reductions in some of the things that we don't want to see, such as, you know, our deaths in custody and the numbers in our criminal justice system, especially around our youth. Yeah, I just want to see them achieving and living life better.
I think in the world that we live in today, I think we have influence within, you know, the community, government and private sectors. I'd like to see that grow more and more. I'd like to see VALS have a fully and adequately staffed service in every major regional city across Victoria. It's probably not too much to ask. It's an achievable goal, as long as there's goodwill from every party that we're involved in, and that's the major thing, is goodwill from everyone dealing with our people.
It's 50 years since the inception of VALS, and it was valuable way back then, and it's valuable today.